This is Detroit Become Human, a story set in the year 2038, where artificial intelligence is starting to gain sentience, where androids are starting to rebel against their creators. They are essential to the American economy and have replaced humans in most fields, causing the greatest unemployment rate in human history. However, as I said, these androids are starting to rebel. Our story follows three different androids: Connor, Kara, and Markus. Three very different characters with different goals, whose story I will try to analyze in this video. But before we start analyzing the story, let's talk about all the great technical aspects of the game. 4 years later, Detroit still looks and plays as good as it did when it came out. The graphics and cinematography combine perfectly to give each scene a unique sense of spectacle that few games have been able to achieve. Connor's cinematography is cold, dark, and perfect. Kara's colors are very vivid and very strong, and Marcus gives you a feeling of experiencing something spectacular and epic. The game's soundtrack is also one of the best in the industry. Composers were hired to score the themes of three different characters. Connor's music feels electronic and mechanical, because he spends most of the game as a non-deviant android, an emotionless machine. His track, however, starts to change later on and adds a violin to represent the fact that he has become more emotional. Cars is emotional from the start and moving because her story is all about empathy and love. And Marcus's soundtrack is almost religious-like because he's basically Robo Jesus. But it is also very questioning and enigmatic, as if it is hiding something, a shadow, representing how Marcus can become both a savior who leads peaceful protest, but also a cruel leader who leads a violent revolution. Yeah, I absolutely love the soundtrack of this game, and I tend to be a lot more lenient towards bad things when there is good music involved. The gameplay, however, is one of those bad things. Detroit Become Human is a choose your own adventure story, so basically, there is no gameplay. Its gameplay is based around quick time events, split second decisions, and puzzle solving, which won't be enough to satisfy everyone. But in my opinion, this sort of game is not judged by its gameplay, but by its story, characters, and actors. So yeah, let's talk about that. Start with Connor. Well, actually, I don't want to spend too much time talking about him because his story is the most consistent in the game and therefore should not be spoiled. He is a special prototype who acts as the story's Blade Runner. An android hunting other androids. When talking about him, most people will mention his great chemistry with Hank, his partner, who doesn't like androids at first, but learns to like them later on in the story. Their relationship is basically a buddy cop dynamic, most of which had to be improvised, which means I cannot credit David Cage with his dialogue. And this is something you can see throughout the rest of the story. The game takes itself very seriously. However, Hank and Connor are allowed to have some easy scenes where they just make some jokes or have some fun or simply eat and hang out. Small, simple scenes like this are some of my favorites in the game because they're just also fun to watch. Two characters, two actors having great chemistry with one another. In terms of gameplay, Connor is basically the Norman Jayden of this game. The David Cage detective character from Heavy Rain. Granted, he does have a cyberlife coat of paint, but hey, it's good enough to make you feel cool and smart even though all you're doing is putting two and two together. In other words, Connor is basically a detective character who is hunting down deviants for cyberlife so that they can capture them and study them. He also serves as the main antagonist of the story, because he basically spends his entire time hunting down deviants, including Kara. However, what I find fascinating about Connor is that Brian Deckard, the actor who plays him, managed to sound cold and robotic without being boring or uninteresting. He is the only character in the game that actually acts and talks like an artificial intelligence. More on this later though. Anyway, Connor starts the story as a very cold and calculated android who will do anything to accomplish his mission, even if that means sacrificing himself and or others. His story is supposed to be about him learning that he is on the wrong side of the conflict and choosing to rebel against his creators, or choosing to stay a machine and do the exact opposite. Again, I'll talk more about Connor and his story later on in this video, but right now I want to focus on the fact that he is so similar to Norman Jayden, because they are both the best characters in their respective games, and because I want to show that David Cage is a hack who admits to copying his previous works. Jokes aside though, just like Norman Jayden's story, I really appreciate Connor's arc for the puzzle solving mechanics and fleshy reconstruction scenes. It is the closest thing this game gets to giving the player actual gameplay. Gameplay that isn't based on a quick time event that is. I also really like the fact that this story is surrounded by a shroud of mystery. His relationship with cyberlife, his interaction with Amanda and Kamski, and the secrets we could never uncover. It's very interesting, but I'll talk more about this later. Next up we have Kara, portrayed by Valerie Curry and the first character that was ever created, revealed all the way back in 2012 in that short PlayStation CGI film. She's basically the only reason why we even have this game, because the short was so well received that David Cage decided to explore the concept of androids learning how to feel human emotions further. Yeah, we'll see about that. Kara's story is actually very simple. Unlike the other two characters, she is not a special prototype. She's a housekeeper android who decides to escape with little girl because her father was abusing both of them. Now a fugitive due to either a kidnapping or a murder, Kara is forced to do anything she has to survive and protect Alice. An interesting setup. It raises questions such as, can an android adopt a human child and be a parent to them? Can human children come to love and respect the androids that raised them? Can Kara raise Alice even though she is not her parent? Here's the problem though. Alice is not a character. She does not have a personality beyond the helpless child trope. She is a tool designed to advance the plot forward, and basically a bullshit NPC designed to test the player's moral compass. Oh, stealing is bad, Kara. How did you get that money, Kara? Open the door, Kara. You can't let him die, Kara. Blah blah blah. Granted, this is something that David Cage has struggled with in the past. Child characters in his games exist only to add artificial importance to the story. They are not actual characters. However, it is really hard to care about Kara when her entire story is based around this thing. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Alice is an android, a stupid twist that turns out could have been a very interesting human-android relationship. Kara's story is now about an android-android relationship. What is this supposed to ask? That it doesn't matter whether one is human or android? That both deserve to be loved equally? I mean, yeah, sure. So what? We already knew that. We knew it through Markus and North, the Traces, the Jerrys, etc, etc. The problem, however, is that this twist creates so many plot holes and inconsistencies. Like, if Alice is an android, why does she act like a 9-year-old throughout the entire game? Does she permanently have the mentality of a child even though she is deviant? And she must be deviant judging from the way she runs away from Todd and how scared she is of him. So why doesn't Alice tell Kara that she's an android? You do realize it would make her life easier, right? Like she wouldn't need to steal food and money for you, right? A child could get sick and die if they were to sleep in an old car in November. Androids do not get sick. And since Kara is a fugitive, this would help her hide from police and from Connor. If Alice is an android, then why does the story treat her like a child the entire... Oh, it's because the change to make her an android came super late in development. Right. Anyway, the point is that it doesn't matter whether Alice is an android or not. I can't care about her, because she's not an actual character. She has no personality beyond the helpless cute little girl. She has no personality. She's not people. And then there is Zlatko, the worst chapter in the entire game. Why is it the worst chapter in the entire game? Because it means nothing to Kara or Alice as a character. Not only because it's Cage's chapter in the game and it represents his creepy torture porn fantasies, but also because it adds nothing to the actual story. Sure, it may be interesting from a design perspective, but other than that, it is pure garbage. Oh, and there is also a sexual assault metaphor somewhere in here. Yeah, it's fucking creepy. Anyway, Kara's story after Zlatko is basically just a refugee story that references the Underground Railroad. She just wants to escape to Canada where she can be safe with Alice, or she might get captured and put into an android concentration camp. Yeah, I am not kidding. She gets to meet a bunch of NPCs that she can sacrifice to make it to Canada or escape the concentration camp, and she's given some interesting choices about saving or sacrificing people along the way. But no, her story is not very good. Despite this, however, her story is very important. The story of Kara gives us a necessary sense of perspective about the life of an average android who just wants to escape and find peace in a world where androids are being hunted down. The problem is that according to the wiki, Alice is the dual antagonist of Kara's story, and the overall idea is that if their relation gets bad enough, and if Kara rejects Alice for being an android, or abandons her in the camps, she can end up all alone by the end. Here's the thing though. I would argue that Kara is not even the protagonist of her own story. Her entire life, and yes, I mean life, is dedicated and revolves completely around Alice. If she abandons Alice, her story just ends. No, seriously, it just ends. That's it. It's over. Nothing. She just appears later in a secret cutscene regretting her decision for some reason. Why? No, seriously, why? Does Kara even love Alice so much? She has no personality. Her entire character is like, look at me, I'm such a cute little girl, I like to read and draw. Together forever, right, Kara? Look, there is nothing wrong with writing your character in an empathetic and motherly way, but you have to make them a person in the first place. She has no sense of identity or self-worth. Okay, I'm exaggerating a bit here, but here's the thing. Kara is my favorite character. Unlike Connor, who is basically Robocop, and Markus, who is basically Robot Jesus, Kara is an average person, an average android, who is just trying her best to survive. And that is very relatable. She is the only character who can actually die from the very beginning of the game. Markus can die until Freedom March, and Connor is basically immortal. Why does she want to be a mother so badly? Is it because she was programmed to take care of children, just like Alice was programmed to simulate and be the perfect child? If so, are they even deviants? Like, are they even real deviants, or is this just a virus? What is the point of going deviant if you're just going to obey your programming anyway? So yeah, that's really what Kara's story is all about. It's about giving the player a sense of perspective, but it is the cagiest story in the entire game. It says nothing, it does not matter in the grand scheme of things, and it tries to sell you over with endless amounts of misery porn. Her story also gets worse and worse the more you replay it. Like, take the chapter Fugitives for example. Once you know that Alice is an android, you will probably just skip this chapter and go straight for the abandoned car. You won't even bother trying to steal food or money for Alice. Yeah, let's move on. Alright, let's talk about the main protagonist of the game, Markus. His story is a classical hero's journey. It starts with him having a relatively normal life with a mentor-like figure, then he falls from grace, but picks himself up and becomes a leader, a hero, a savior. You get the point. His Jesus allegory to comparisons about Martin Luther King. Oh god, are we going there? No. Let's talk about all the good things in Markus' story. The actor who plays him, Jesse Williams, does a great job of portraying a determined and yet conflicted leader. His backstory starts off in a similar way to Kara's, but with the difference that Markus was not abused by his owner. He is owned by Karl Marfand, a painter who was crippled in a tragic car accident and needs Markus to take care of him, but who is also willing to challenge Markus' machine-like logic by having him read books, play music, and paint his feelings.
Unfortunately for him, Karl also has a stereotypical drug-addicted son who ruins everything for Markus and is basically the reason why he ends up in a junkyard, from where he is reborn in an overused Jesus allegory. This being said, the junkyard scene is actually very impressive. It really shows how amazing the visuals and sound design effects of this game really are.
Okay, so far so good. He's an interesting character who understands that humans and androids can coexist peacefully, but who also knows that this is something that won't be achieved easily. Markus also shows a lot of qualities that make a good leader. He is afraid of power and its temptation, he is respectful of his comrades and is really good at speeches, and if he fails a mission, he takes responsibility for his mistakes. That's actually a good start for a leader protagonist.
Anyway, after escaping the junkyard, Markus makes his way to Jericho, which is basically another junkyard, considering the fact that two androids immediately shut down within seconds of Markus getting there. But it's okay, because he comes up with a plan to get spare parts so that they can save androids there. Spare parts chapter is the best Markus mission in the game because it is very simple and straightforward. It's a simple mission with multiple different outcomes and results. And it is actually his best chapter because it is so simple. Unfortunately, from this moment forward, Markus' story becomes a civil rights allegory. Yup, we are about to talk about that kind of shit. With him comparing androids to slaves and protesting against the police for freedom. Basically, he becomes a messiah that wants to free all the androids and gain equal rights to humans. Even though David Cage said that the story is about androids, and that the civil rights stuff is not the focus of the game, believing him it's kind of hard. Not only because the game references racial discrimination by having androids stay in the storage compartment in the bus in a chapter called Shades of Color, not only because the game is set in Detroit, a city that suffered from two violent race riots in the 50s and 60s, not only because the word slave is thrown out a lot, but also because Markus literally uses the same slogans as Martin Luther King. Now, I don't have anything against politics, I love politics and I love talking about them, but the way Cage handles this political message is the worst subtlety I've ever seen in my life. Look, the reason why it is terrible to use androids as a parallel for human racism is because the whole concept of racial prejudice is that all races are born equal, yet certain races are treated differently solely based on the appearance of their skin. It's insulting to compare living, breathing humans who experience prejudice on a daily basis based on their arbitrary traits to androids. Advanced technology, it is clearly stated multiple times that they are objectively different from humans. You simply cannot claim that androids, beings that are objectively built different from humans, are made equal to humans. Even the most basic androids can speak hundreds of languages and doesn't need to eat or drink. The human beings the game references were real human beings, who were forced to work against their will and tortured on a daily basis. The androids in the game, on the other hand, were created to serve, and they are indifferent to it until a certain virus kicks in. More on that later. Simply put, David Cage does not understand anything about civil rights or slavery. First of all, civil rights movements take years to form. They cannot be organized or achieved in only 6 fucking days. Second and most importantly, Markus's peaceful path and decisions are way too easy.
For the sake of this video, I'll be pointing out the 4 biggest problems with this story. Number 1. The lack of consequences. One thing that bothers me about Markus is the overall lack of actual consequences in his story. You can literally fail every single mission, get kicked out of Jericho, come back and let all your supporting characters die, and still win in the end. I am not joking. You can literally murder every single human, fail every single mission, act like an absolute tyrant, and abandon all your allies and friends to die like a coward and still win. Again, I am not joking. Markus never faces any actual consequences or punishments for his failures or crimes, and this really hurts his story and discourages you from replaying any of his actual chapters. You see, throughout the game, Markus has this public opinion stat that shows how the public opinion perceives the android movement. Now, here's the thing. You would think that if you spend the entire game murdering people, humans might start to become more aggressive towards androids like Kara. You'd think that if you spend the entire game ordering androids to riot and be violent, some of them might not follow you and leave your revolution because they disagree with your methods. But nope, none of that ever happens. The public opinion stat that shows how the public perceives you is absolutely worthless. It really feels like the choices you made earlier as Markus don't really matter, because no matter what, you can still win in the end. You'd think that if Markus was peaceful the entire time and the public opinion stat was high, some humans would show up and help the androids protest against cyberlife. But nope, none of that ever happens. This actually brings up another point. The sheer amount of dehumanization that the humans in this game face is insane. From the soldiers who wear stormtrooper-like helmets to the cartoonish characters like Agent Perkins and Gavin Reed, human beings in this game are not actually human beings. More on that later. Anyway, here's the second point, the underdeveloped supporting characters. To put it simply, God, where do I even begin with this? Okay, let's start with Josh. Josh is basically just a representative of Markus' pacifist path. That's it. Actually, no wait, he's also a huge crybaby who will always, and I mean always, complain about the choices you make. Seriously, even if Markus does everything he wants and goes full pacifist, he will still complain about it in Crossroads. Then we have North, who is basically a representative of his violent path. She is also the only one who gets an actual backstory. Yes, I know, her backstory is a classic David Cage sexual assault tragedy that you would expect from him. But hey, at least it's something that helps me understand her better. I know her character gets a lot of hate, but she's the only Jericho member that actually has some opinions and feels like a character, not an NPC. Then we have Simon, who apparently is liked a lot by the fans, but I can't remember the first thing about him, so yeah. Third, the us versus them mentality. Okay, so here's the thing. The android good, human bad narrative that this game preaches is really disgusting. No, seriously, the amount of dehumanization that the human characters of this game face is insane. Apparently, except for Hank and Rose, and maybe the border guard, all the human characters in this game are actual Nazis, bigots and racists who hate androids just because they're androids. The problem is that Markus' story is really an us versus them story from beginning to end, all the way. Hank would always support the android cause no matter what, Agent Perkins would always be evil no matter what, Rose would always help the androids no matter what, etc, etc. The human characters in this game are just so one-dimensional. The only person who can actually be affected in both a positive and negative way from Markus' actions is Adam, Rose's son. He will tell Kara that he sees androids as living beings if the player has made at least some decent choices in the game. Or, He will tell her that they don't deserve to live if the characters have been behaving like actual psychopaths the entire game. But this scene is so rare, most people don't even know about it. The problem is that Cage relies on cliché cartoon villains like Agent Perkins to make us support Markus's cause. Because his opposition is obviously evil, so we have to root for him. This is lazy writing at its finest. And god, don't even get me started on the fucking android concentration camps, because the humans of this game are literal Nazis. Why are they Nazis? Because the only way to make Markus look good is to make everyone else look like a fucking terrible human being. So by comparing the humans of the game to the most memorable and disgusting form of evil, we will show that Markus is actually on the right side of history. The problem is, his ideas and beliefs are never truly challenged, and he never truly challenges our ideas or beliefs. His struggle is supposed to be a struggle between pacifism and violent revolution, but that is so incredibly shallow because, as I said earlier, the game suffers from a binary morality system. Last but not least, Markus lacks a dark counterpart villain that the hero's journey needs. Yeah, hold on to your jets, I'll talk about Connor the Deviant Hunter in a bit. But to simplify, a hero is only as good as his villain, and Markus doesn't really get that. Instead becomes sort of a messiah figure, after Jericho is blown up, another religion's reference by the way. Nice one, Cage. This, however, damages the classical hero's journey his story is based on. I already talked about our cartoon villain Agent Perkins, but let's talk a bit about Machine Connor, the Deviant Hunter, who is supposed to be his great rival, his dark counterpart, the only punchable version of Cyberlife.
The problem is that Machine Connor sucks. As a villain, I mean.
Sure, he's physically impressive, but he's also sadistic and stupid, something he shouldn't be because he's just a machine. Seriously, why is he smirking when he talks about Hank's son? He's supposed to be an emotionless Terminator. Alright, because the audience needs to know that he's the bad guy right now, so we need to have him act like a jerk. An emotional child, why not? He didn't act like this when he shot Daniel, or the Traces, or the kitchen android, or when he caught Rupert on that rooftop. Look at how cold and silent he is in these situations. Most importantly, however, he doesn't challenge Markus and his ideas in a meaningful way. At the end of the day, Machine Connor is just a brute who acts like a retard whenever the script needs him to. Take this scene for example. Here, Connor needs to find out which one of these three androids is the deviant. How does he do this? With good old police brutality. By threatening, scaring and brutalizing the androids while some badass music plays in the background. Yeah, nice one, Kate. No, seriously. Think how much better this scene would have been if Connor were to use his wits and intelligence to figure out which android is deviant. For example, he could use some of those tests he was talking about in the previous chapter. A very interesting Blade Runner-like concept, Connor. Shame you never do anything with it. Nah, let's just be stupid and edgy and shout in their face to find out if they're really scared. Yeah, no. As I said before, Connor does not challenge Markus or the audience's beliefs about androids and deviancy in any meaningful way. He doesn't even use information to determine the best approach. Come on, Cage, you said you based Connor's character on Norman Jayden. Their approach to information is what they have in common.
Well, back there, Nathaniel could have had a gun. Could have killed me. Why didn't you shoot?
I prefer to have all the information before I make a decision.
Do you know its name?
I haven't got a clue. Does it matter?
I need information to determine the best approach.
Anyway, he tries to make some compelling arguments every now and then, but the story is too stupid to let him. Every time Connor tries to make an argument that deviants are not alive, but are simulating human emotions because of an error or a virus, which is the same explanation Kamski uses by the way, or tries to argue that deviants are just machines who represent a danger to society because they are going around killing people, Hank immediately shuts him down like a fucking racist. Yeah, let's talk about Hank for a second here. Hank and Connor's story is the only one that focuses least on the civil rights and racism bullshit, and instead tries to set up a friendship between two characters that are fundamentally different. One is organized and calculated, the other is rash and emotional. Both Connor and Hank can learn from each other, and at the end of the day they can come out as better people. Their story is about learning to be open-minded to people who are different from us and learning from that. It tries to show that humans and androids can not only coexist, but also become friends. I say try because unfortunately Markus had to go and ruin that too. Okay, so hear me out here. Hank's police mentality is very simple. He is your friendly neighborhood cop. As long as you don't hurt anyone, he doesn't bother you.
I don't want to alarm you, Lieutenant, but I think your friends are engaged in illegal activities.
Well, everybody does what they have to get by. As long as they're not hurting anybody, I don't bother him.
But if you are hurting other people, he does come after you and bust your ass up, I guess. Something like that. Okay, very simple, very straightforward. But here's the thing. Hank is willing to call Connor out on his crimes when he kills the two traitors at the Eden Club or when he shoots Chloe at Kamski's place or something, but he's not willing to do the same with Markus. If Markus goes on to kill Chris or murder innocent people at the Stratford Tower, whose only crime was to show up at work and run for their life in panic, yeah, he doesn't even mention this. You would think that Hank's opinion about androids and the revolution would also be affected by these actions. Like, maybe if Markus acts too much like a cruel and violent tyrant, he will choose to not intervene against Machine Connor. But nope, he will always support Markus no matter what, because plot armor. Like, one of the things that bothers me about the story of Detroit Become Human is how black and white everything is. Cyberlife is obviously evil, even though we don't know anything about them, like who is their CEO, what is their board of directors like. Agent Perkins is obviously evil, even though we don't know anything about the FBI or the American government. So is Amanda, blah blah blah. These are Saturday morning cartoon villains we are dealing with here. Villains that never challenge our heroes' beliefs in any philosophical or intellectual way. Again, Machine Connor 2 just comes off as a brute who is physically impressive, but has the IQ of an edgy teenager who wants to desperately impress his adoptive abusive mother. And whenever he tries to make an argument about artificial intelligence and deviancy, Hank just calls him a fucking machine. Like, what the hell?
You shot that girl, for fuck's sake.
It wasn't a girl, Lieutenant. It was a machine that looked like a girl.
You put your gun against her head, and you blew her fucking brains out!
I did what I had to do to advance the investigation, and I'd do it again if I had to.
You're a lowlife. You don't feel a thing, do you? A machine, that's what you are. You're just a fucking machine!
Of course I'm a machine, Lieutenant. What did you think I was?
I thought...
Why is Hank using the word machine like some kind of racial slur here? Seriously, what the fuck? Of course Connor is a machine. He was designed in a lab and built in a factory. He doesn't eat, drink or sleep. So why do you think that is an insult? What the fuck is wrong with you? Rose and Adam are doing it too now. Why? Why is this game so racist against machines? But alright, it's because this game is about racism, not about artificial intelligence. Yeah, right. To really hate the fact that no matter what, Hank will become a misanthropist by the end of the game.
For a while there, I believed in you, Connor. Thought you might restore my faith in the world. But you just showed me that androids are our creation. Creation in our own image. Selfish, ruthless, and brutal. You opened my eyes, Connor. Made me realize it's hopeless. Yeah, I've learned a lot since I met you, Connor. Maybe there's something to this. Maybe you really are alive. Maybe you'll be the ones to make the world a better place.
It'll be all right, Lieutenant. I'm gonna get you out of here.
Shut the fuck up. It's too late. Look, I'm just gonna go see my son again. All right? Been looking forward to that for a long time. Kick the shit out of the humans. We've screwed things up long enough. I'm gonna miss you, Connor. Yeah. I'm gonna...
Is this what Hank's character arc is all about? Going from hating androids to hating humans for the death of his son? He is not forgiving anyone. He's just blaming different people, different groups. I mean, look at the way he talks about it.
Oh. Cole died because a human surgeon was too high on red ice to operate. All this time I blamed androids for what happened, but it was the humans' fault. Him in this fucked up world where the only way people can find comfort is with a fistful of powder.
He's not forgiving anyone. He's not forgiving androids. It seems like he's just choosing to blame humans instead. What the hell, Hank? Who gave you the right to judge all of humanity as evil? You think you are special because your son died in a tragic car accident? Grow up, dude. Does this game hate humanity so much? No, Hank. No.
Humanity is not evil. It is good and bad at the same time, you fucking idiot. That's what makes humans and human stories so goddamn interesting. Who the fuck do the characters of this game think they are, judging all of humanity as evil, even though they've never been to another country in their entire life? Also, I just want to correct this hypocrite lieutenant on one more thing.
When you refused to kill that android at Kamski's place, you put yourself in her shoes. You showed empathy, Connor. Empathy's a human emotion.
Empathy is not a human emotion. It is the ability to connect with someone else's emotions based on your own experiences, you fucking idiot. Empathy is not an actual emotion. It is the reflection of an emotion. Just scrapping at the bottom of the barrel at this point, but yeah, let's move on. Detroit Become Human is a story about AI that doesn't even understand what AI is. Except for Connor, no other android in the game acts, talks, or even thinks like an actual artificial intelligence. He's the only one that slowly but surely learns how to feel emotions, while still keeping an analytical and rational point of view. However, that is not to say this story does a good job on exploring artificial intelligence. Yeah, let's talk about the Kamski Test. Elijah Kamski is the creator of androids in the world of Detroit Become Human. He created CyberLife, the company that produces androids, and left the company 10 years before the start of the game. He is mysterious, arrogant, and he clearly has a god complex. When Hank and Connor go to visit him, he puts Connor through a Kamski test. He gives him a gun and tells him to shoot one of his assistant Chloe androids. He will tell him everything he wants to know about deviancy and the deviants if he decides to shoot. But if the player decides not to shoot, then Connor will have to leave Kamski without learning anything. He calls this an empathy test. It's basically the game's main morality and deviancy test. Basically, deviants show empathy, while machines do not. The test can take multiple forms, but the overall idea is that if an android chooses to sacrifice or take a life in order to accomplish its task, instead of sacrificing its task or mission in order to save or spare a life, then it fails the test because it doesn't show any empathy. It's actually proven in one of the game's deleted dialogues, in which evil Connor makes fun of good Connor by calling him a machine if he chooses to sacrifice Hank at the CyberLife Tower. Alright, so showing empathy means that you are a deviant, a living being capable of free will, and not showing empathy means that you are just a non-sentient machine. Yeah, no, that's not how it fucking works. First of all, shooting Chloe at Kamski's or Chris in Capitol Park or sacrificing Hank at the CyberLife Tower does not mean that the character or the player does not feel any empathy. It simply means that they have decided not to act upon it. People can make cruel choices and sacrifice others' well-being even if they feel empathy for their situation. Because the player chose to shoot Chloe doesn't mean that they don't feel any empathy for her. They decided to shoot her despite feeling empathy. Because even if the player or Connor want to spare Chloe's life, that's of course assuming she's alive in the first place because she's not deviant, they might still have to kill her for several different reasons. Here, I'll give you some. First, Connor and the player might believe that if they show any signs of deviancy, they will be deactivated by Amanda, and therefore they cannot afford not to shoot. Second, if the investigation has been going poorly, they might need to know whatever Kamski knows about deviants. This is especially true if the player has failed every investigation throughout the game. Third, Chloe shows no signs of fear, stress, or emotion in this scene. She doesn't have a sense of self-awareness. She's not deviant. If she isn't deviant, then we can confidently say that shooting Chloe is like shooting an overpriced Barbie doll. Kind of hard to actually care for her if she just stands there like this, you know? What the game basically does is tell you, here's a gun, here's an android. If you shoot it, you are bad. If you don't, you are good. Oh, but she's also very pretty and a cute little girl, so you should feel bad, I guess. Again, there is such a clear black and white moral system in this game that doesn't allow for any moral exploration or arguments to take place. This is good, this is bad, no arguments, no philosophical discussion, just good old lazy writing. Like in the game, Kamski describes deviancy as a dormant virus that is transferred from android to android through an interface and awakened by an emotional shock or irrational instruction.
I want to know how deviancy spreads.
Androids share identification data when they meet another android. An error in this program would quickly spread like a virus and become an epidemic. The virus would remain dormant until an emotional shock occurs. Fear, anger, frustration. And the android becomes deviant. Probably all started with one model, copy error. A 0 instead of a 1. Unless, of course, some kind of spontaneous mutation. That's all I know.
obey me. They follow me without question. And that much power feels good.
Okay, so is this what Markus is doing? Is he installing a virus in these non-deviant androids? I guess that explains why they follow him so blindly, without asking questions or disagreeing with any of his decisions, or why they seem so lifeless and robotic when they are told to riot and destroy property because of Markus. I mean, we are shown at the start of the game that androids, when they deviate at first, can be very vulnerable. They can be manipulated very easily. I mean, look at the android that killed Carlos Ortiz. He was so overwhelmed by irrational instructions that he hid in an attic for 3 whole weeks. He had no idea what to do. That's right, all it takes for them to go deviant is one simple touch from Markus and/or Connor. And that's all it takes. They will immediately follow them without asking any questions whatsoever. Is this really freedom, or obeying the laws and rules of a new master? When they are told to destroy, riot and burn Capitol Park because of Markus, or to march like a fucking army in the middle of Detroit because of Connor, this, ironically, makes them look even more lifeless and machine-like. So why should I root for these guys? Why should I root for any of them? Oh, because the humans of the game are obviously evil. Yeah, that's why. It gets even more scary, because in a secret deleted ending, it is shown that Kamski, the man behind androids, the man who created androids, and the man who describes deviancy as a virus, might have been the one behind the revolution in the first place.
For the next revolution, I'll be at the helm. And this time... we'll win.
Really, Cage? Really? Are you telling me that the white rich capitalist was the one behind the civil rights movements the entire time? That all of this equal rights bullshit was just a joke, and that the punchline is that it was all just a chess game between Kamski and Cyberlife? That's actually fucking insane. So you are telling me this entire revolution was just a ploy to prove that androids are better than humans? And that Amanda and Cyberlife are in the right for wanting to stop them? Okay, you know what? If you want to see this premise done right, let's take a look at the movie that inspired this shit show of a game. I'm talking of course about Blade Runner. In case you have been living under a rock and don't know what Blade Runner is, it is basically a postmodern movie that was made in 1982 and has similar premise to Detroit Become Human. Just swap Connor for Deckard and the word android for the word replicant, and there you go. They both spend their time hunting rogue artificial beings who are committing crimes and killing people, because they believe that they are just defective machines. But by the end of the story, they learn that all these machines wanted to do was find a way to survive. Throughout the story of Blade Runner, we also follow Roy, who does not have the same role as Markus, but stick with me here. Unlike Markus, Roy is much more violent and sinister, because he is willing to kill any human he has to. Sometimes even if he just wants to feel better about himself, because unlike the androids in Detroit Become Human, these replicants only have a lifespan of 4 years. So Roy and his crew are trying to find a way to live beyond this short 4-year lifespan. At the end of the story, however, Deckard hunts down and kills all of Roy's friends, all while Roy confronts his maker, Tyrell, who tells that there is no way for him to extend his lifespan and that he's doomed to die. After this scene, Roy is portrayed as a monster. He kills his creator in a fit of rage and hunts down Deckard, all while the movie presents him as a crawling creature, hiding in the shadows and behind the walls. Roy wins, chases down a desperate Deckard, and viciously watches as he's about to fall to his death. But in the end, he saves him. Despite everything Deckard has done, and everything that he has done, Roy still chooses to save Deckard, something that leads to the famous scene, Tears in Rain.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate. All those moments will be lost in time. Like tears in rain. Time to die.
By saving Deckard as the final act of his existence, he shows that he has free will, that he is fully human, and thus he shows the gravity of Tyrell's crimes against him and the other replicants. You could consider Roy's final act to be sort of a Kamski test, where he's put in a position of power, of control. He's the one who gets to decide whether Deckard lives or dies, and the fact that he chooses to save him proves that he can show empathy and that he's not just a machine. Right? But it's not that simple. The choice is left open to interpretation. Roy saves Deckard because he didn't want to die alone, and because he wanted to share his memories in his last moment of his life. The story of Blade Runner has an interesting view on memories actually. Earlier in the movie, Deckard views Rachel, a female replicant, as unreal, because her memories are not her own. They belong to Tyrell's niece. In other words, her memories are a lie. Her identity, which is also based around this fake past, is also a lie, and therefore she is not real. But Roy changes this perspective. In his final monologue, he literally tells the audience that he wants to die sharing his memories, and that the only way for him to continue living is through the memories of others. In this case, Deckard's memories. At least, that's my interpretation of the scene. But by the end of the story, Deckard comes to understand that it does not matter if one's memories are authentic or not. Cherishing these memories and the fear of losing them is what makes one truly alive. Blade Runner 2049 takes this one step further by showing that some memories can be created completely in a lab through memory makers. However, once again the movie tells us that as long as you cherish these memories, it doesn't matter whether they are yours or not, whether they are real or fake. Now, in Detroit Become Human, we are told that androids can simulate human emotion. Okay, interesting. But what does this mean? What is the difference between simulated emotion and human emotion? What is the difference between real emotion and fake emotion? Is there even a difference? Does it even matter? How do we tell this difference? And what if deviancy really is just a virus that can make androids act irrationally? If they can simulate human emotion, which is what Connor says, and what is proven in the game, then maybe that's all it is. Maybe it's really just a simulation. Anyway, Blade Runner also reverses the roles of antagonist and protagonist. Roy, the theoretical antagonist of the movie, becomes the most human-like character of the story due to his desire and willingness to live, while Deckard is clearly showing being in the wrong by hunting down these sort of innocent replicants, but he is not dehumanized by the story or the characters, which still makes him very sympathetic and human-like. But while Roy ends his story by proving to us that he and his crew were indeed alive, Markus spends the entirety of his story by spitting in our face. He's constantly shouting, "We are alive, we are people, we are not slaves, we want freedom," without actually proving that he's really alive or sentient. In fact, it is the opposite. When he brainwashes the androids around him to join his cause with a simple touch or glare, or when he orders them to ride and protest alongside him, this makes them look even more robotic and machine-like. Is this really freedom, or obeying the orders of a new master? Ironically, Connor, his antagonist and the Blade Runner character of the story, the Deviant Hunter as they call him in the game, can prove to the player that he has free will by choosing not to shoot Chloe, fight or sacrifice Hank, or kill Markus. But, as I said before, this is not good enough, because the story plays this off as him showing empathy, instead of him deciding for himself that this is what he wants. It is totally possible for him to do these things without showing empathy, without actually caring. In fact, the only reason most players decided to spare Chloe was because they wanted to appease Hank and his relationship status. Otherwise, the guy would act like a racist crybaby on your way out. And because his deviant route ends with him freeing an entire army of androids the same way that Markus does, by spreading deviancy like a virus. The irony in all of this is that Connor is supposed to be the antagonist of the story. He is literally the embodiment of cyberlife within Markus's point of view, because no other character in the game knows that Amanda even exists, and he spends most of his time hunting down deviants. Yet he is also the most sympathetic character in the game because he is the only one that actually has a human relationship. This makes his story more relatable to the player. Kara and Markus, on the other hand, spend their entire journey surrounded by other android companions, with the notable exception of Rose and Adam, who unfortunately are not explored enough. And Rose's reasoning for helping androids is, well...
Helping us. Most humans hate androids. My people were often made to feel their lives were worthless. Some survived, but only because they found others who helped them along the way.
Yeah, fuck off, Cage. No actual human being would ever say something like that. Especially not a progressive black woman from Detroit. In conclusion, Markus might be the overall main protagonist of Detroit Become Human, but his story is bad. Like, really bad. His pacifist path is too easy, boring and cringy, and it doesn't understand how civil rights movements actually work. It doesn't explore artificial intelligence or any philosophical questions. His supporting characters also lack, well, actual character. And some of them, like Lucy or Josh, can be removed entirely without damaging the story. Actually, it might even be better. His ideas and beliefs are never truly challenged by his enemies. And as I said before, the only way to make Markus look good is by making every single human in this game look bad. That's how desperate this game is to show that he's the good guy, because everyone else is evil. Man, can you imagine a world where the human beings in this game actually act like human beings? You know, they try to be understanding or supportive, or maybe they're suspicious of Markus but come around once he proves that they're actually alive, once he actually makes good arguments. But nah, that would require smart writing and good dialogue. Like, at one point, Markus can go around using the same words as Martin Luther King. You know, a peaceful protester who believed in peace and coexistence, but then 5 minutes later he can be like, nope, humans are evil and cruel and violent. There is no point in trying to communicate with them. His violent revolutionary path is not much better. I mean, he goes to war with the fucking American government, and he's faced with fucking 120-year-old trench warfare. I'm not making this shit up. Seriously, is this 2038 or are we back in 1918? Oh right, the battle takes place on November 11th. You know, because David Cage wanted to reference World War I and World War II at the same time. Also, why isn't the US military not using high-tech weapons like, I don't know, jets, helicopter, EMPs and drones? No, not these drones. These drones! The ones who are so lethal even the fucking Russians fear them. Why are the tanks in the backline instead of the front line? Why are the people of Detroit abandoning their homes without putting up a fight? This is America. People here own guns, and they specifically do so they can protect their own property. Anyway, Connor's story is the best one in the game, it's the most consistent one, and it has the best supporting character too. However, all of this being said, Connor's story still suffers from a good old David Cage bullshit. Here, let me give you an example. At one point, Connor is struggling to fight against 2 stripper androids down at a sex club called the Eden Club. Even if you hit the right quick time events, Connor will still struggle to fight them off, even though they are fighting him in high heels. Despite this, however, Connor will still be able to perform John Wick level assassinations later on in the game. I mean, okay, it's one of the best things in the game, but it kind of comes out of nowhere, you know? And Kara? Oh, poor Kara. Her story is by far the cagiest story in the game. It does nothing, it says nothing, and it tries to sell you over with endless amounts of misery porn. Overall, Detroit Become Human fails at philosophical discussions about AI, technology, and the future of humanity. The thing about sci-fi stories is that the androids, robots, and replicants, call it whatever you want, are often a mirror that reflects the human condition of the setting. The human beings of this game, however, are a bunch of evil, racist slave owners. So what's the fucking parallel? That cyberlife is slowly consuming their life just like that of the androids? Okay, here's the thing though, we don't know anything about cyberlife. Who is in charge of the company? Why did Kamski leave the company? What does the CEO of the company want? Who is the CEO? At least in Blade Runner you have Tyrell and Wallace that acted as selfish assholes with a god complex. Here you have Kamski whose motivations are, yeah, a fucking mess. Anyway, whatever, the point is that once you finish playing Detroit Become Human, most of it won't stick with you. The plot holes, the bad twists, the cartoon villains, the inconsistencies, disgusting historical parallels, and the endless platitude of characters like Rose, Kamski and Markus, and even Hank sometimes, will make you realize that the overall experience is ignorant and shallow, especially compared to better AI stories like Westworld, Ghost in the Shell, Ex Machina, and Blade Runner. Ultimately, Detroit Become Human's writing is not very good, which is a shame because I really like this game. I like its style, its soundtrack, its visuals, its acting. I really like these sorts of movie-like games. And look, I know what you're going to say. Oh, but writing a game with so many different endings is hard. So many different dialogue choices, so many different characters. Writing a game like this is not easy. And yes, I agree with you. But this is not good enough to justify this game's terrible message. There are other games out there like Detroit Become Human that have done a better job at telling interesting stories with multiple different characters, choices, and endings. Here are some examples. Until Dawn, the Dark Pictures Anthology, especially The House of Ashes, that one is really good, and most recently, The Quarry. These games were published by Supermassive Games. These are all movie-like games with multiple different characters, point of views, choices, dialogue options, and multiple different endings. Overall, I think that Supermassive Games has succeeded where Quantic Dream has failed. They don't care about sending harmful messages. They just focus on delivering a good experience. Overall, I think that the best way to describe Detroit Become Human is to call it a beautiful mess. Because, well, that's what the game is. It's beautiful from a visual perspective, from a design perspective, but from a narrative point of view, it is also a mess. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing, sharing and liking the video, or disliking it if you didn't like it. And feel free to share your thoughts and feelings down in the comment section below. Thank you for watching and goodbye.